Good evening, everybody. I hope everybody is having a great week. A lot of great stuff going on throughout the district. I know we have some very important items on this agenda to discuss. So that said, I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. All right. So, Ms. Saya Martinez, would you mind leading us in the pledge this evening?
Sure.
Yeah, so if we can, certainly have a moment of silence prior to that. And again, still keeping in mind all those individuals who have been impacted by COVID-19 and just sending them positive thoughts and prayers.
President Sandoval,
Yes, ma'am.
before we begin, may I do roll call?
Sure. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Pingarelli,
Here.
Mr. Sandoval,
Here.
Mrs. Jones,
Here.
Mrs. Seja Martinez,
Here.
Mrs. Underhill.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. So we will now have a moment of silence, and Ms. Saya Martinez will lead us in the pledge.
Thank you, President Sandoval. And then when I start, I welcome anybody to join me. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Okay.
of the United States of America and to the republic for
which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Saya Martinez.
Thank you, Ms. Stone.
Okay, going on to 3.1, address agenda and consider adoption or recommend changes. Any board members wish to do so?
No.
I do not.
Very well. Ms. Stone?
No,
Ms. Pingarelli?
I'm good.
Okay, perfect. Neither do I. Okay. Moving on to recognitions, 4.1. District Clerk, Ms. Airy?
Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, and those in our community who are joining us from the comfort of your quarantine space. I'm sharing with you tonight just one of the many ways that our Peoria Unified family has found a way to give back to our community through this coronavirus pandemic. A couple of weeks ago, we received an email from our neighbors to the west of us, the Dysart Unified School District, and they were challenging us to join them in printing ear guards using our 3D printers. Now, if you're not familiar with the ear guards, I know we have some photos here that Mr. Oscarson are going to roll through the screen so our community can take a look at what those look like, but they are used to complement face masks, typically the surgical style masks that are worn by those in our medical community. Apparently, after wearing those for an extended period of time, like many of our medical professionals are doing right now, they can really rub the back of their ears and cause a great deal of discomfort. And so when we heard that there was a need, and of course, when we heard that there was a challenge to be met, we stepped up. And so I am so pleased to share with you a little bit about those efforts and what took place and is still taking place here across our district. Dysart asked us to consider making 1,000 ear guards that could then be distributed to our medical community. We immediately called our stellar team at the Met Professional Academy. Many of you know our director there, Mrs. Barb Coakley, as well as networking, technology, and engineering teacher, Mr. Justin Davis, who is the primary teacher over there that uses our 3D printer with his instruction with students that are in the Met Professional Academy. Mr. Davis really was the first one to get right to work, engaging his students in the design process of the ear guards. They then mobilized our community partners, and reached out to some of our fellow CTE teachers. And I'm so pleased to report, not only did we hit the 1,000 mark, but our team of teachers has used their 3D printers to produce more than 3,000 of the ear guards that have been distributed across our community. These are going to organizations that we already have some wonderful partnerships with, such as Peoria Fire Medical Department, Banner Thunderbird Hospital, and the Glendale Fire Department, just to name a few. We have many other community organizations reaching out to us, and I know you can see a number of those photos scrolling across your screen from the great joy that gave us, certainly, to be able to give back and make those donations to those in our medical community that are really doing so much to support our community during this time. So just wanted to make sure we recognize the team at the Met Professional Academy for taking the lead on this, and then, of course, the many other TLC teachers through our CTE department that have stepped up as well. It's really been an incredible effort across our district. They're still growing strong and really providing, I think, a ray of hope through some trying times for our community.
Yeah, that's great. Board members, any comments? Ms. Stone?
I just muted myself, didn't I? I think that's very interesting. I had never considered that, but of course that's going to hurt after a while. So I'm very glad to hear that we were able to help in some way and in a fairly large way. So I'm very appreciative of the team that put forth this effort and, kind of pay it forward.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for that. Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, I'm just excited to see PUSD step up to the challenge as always and utilize the resources that we have to make a difference in the community. So just one more way to make a connection and build those relationships. So way to go, team. Good job.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ms. Pingarelli?
I just wanted to also thank everybody. Grand Canyon University is also doing face shields. I seen Dysart's Facebook post a while ago, so I'm really happy that PUSD is able to step in there and produce so many. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. A.R. Martinez?
Just another thank you, but also what a good role model for our community to see and our students to see how everybody comes together to support each other when we need it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, agreed. And, we always talk about the great programs that we have in PUSD and, our role as a district to, absolutely focus on academics, but build individuals of great character and just the acts of human kindness that have gone on, including what's going on there at the Met and the innovation, just is a testimony to our district's forward thinking. So thank you to everybody for your efforts here. All right, moving right along. Board comments, Ms. Stone?
No, thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a big thank you to the people that are sitting on our community advisory committee. They have been having now, I think, weekly meetings and really giving a lot of time, and also to our staff team that's putting those together. I know that's a very huge lift, especially during this time of, uncertainty, but really appreciate those volunteers' time and helping us figure out what to do about that. And then also just wanted to kind of give a shout out to a lot of our senior students. I've had the opportunity to talk with some different students in our community lately, and these kids are really resilient. They seem to have kind of I wouldn't say moved on, but they are moving on with their excitement about the future. They have a lot of hope. They appreciate greatly the efforts of their teachers. And they also have been saying that they definitely don't take anything for granted anymore, and they miss that traditional interaction with their students and their teachers. But they've learned something from this, and I think it's just good to know that they still are excited and hopeful about the future.
Yeah, agreed. Ms. Pingarelli?
Oh, I'm good.
Okay. Ms. San Martinez?
I enjoy all the social media platforms on all the things going on around our district, from the frontline staff to the classroom and the innovative lessons. I hope to see more of that. One other thing I asked was to join or meet with staff. And I want to say thank you to some of the administrators who had the courage to have a conversation with me, as well as teachers. They definitely have their hands full. So thank you. And I look forward to meeting with more.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for doing that. For me, I mean, yes, everything that has been mentioned, and just a continued thank you to the district as a whole, for their mindfulness and intentionality as we go through this new normal, if you will. I do want to give a shout out to the Peoria Education Foundation for their partnership and that of the city of Peoria. I know they created an emergency fund and to garner items. I realize donations of items that our students will need from an education perspective, as well as those fundamental needs from toiletries, etc. As we go through this. So thank you to Peoria Education Foundation for your partnership. That said, going on to 4.3, Superintendent Comments. Ms. Pallas-Thompson.
Yes, good evening, Dr. Sandoval, Mr. Sandoval. It has been an interesting and actually exciting time. I have to consider it as exciting of what has been occurring in the district. And at our last board meeting, we had the opportunity to update you on our team and their tireless work in the needs of students in the community. And Dr. Reynolds will fill you in on some updates shortly. But there's a group, and you touched on it, Mr. Sandoval, that gets little praise, but we're among the first to say, how can I help? And of course, those are our community and nonprofit partners. And we are so indebted to the work that they have been doing and helping us with our students and our communities, and with their prayers and support and encouragement along the way. And so I'd like to just take a minute, if you would, to highlight some of those. And you did actually, Mr. Sandoval. The city of Peoria, they were the first to say, what do you need? And how can we support you? Most recently, as you pointed out, they organized a donation drive that took place yesterday that we were able to collect items to distribute to our families in need. The Peoria Educational Foundation, I know you're aware of their work along the way, including in this pandemic. They've launched a emergency needs fund to support the critical emergency needs of our families. Totally appreciated. Our Heart Pantry, this local nonprofit, has been putting together snack bags that sustain our children, or try to, on Fridays to help sustain them over the weekend. And that's pretty impressive. We have been meeting regularly with our faith-based council, and this group is always the highlight of my week. They organize a campaign, and they're organizing one now to write letters to our teachers to show their appreciation of all the work that they've been doing to ensure that our kids are still learning. And then Dr. Reynolds and I have had the opportunity to meet with the Rotary, our Rotary group, virtually last week, and they expressed their willingness to do whatever it takes. And they're a group that can really provide the advocacy with the World Health Organization, with the CDC kind of things, because they were the ones that helped eradicate polio. So there are many more that have helped, and we tell them that we totally appreciate each and every one of them. These are our community partners. We feel blessed that we are part of this community. So I just wanted to take a moment and share those things. And then you can move on.
Well, Ms. Pallas-Thompson, thank you for that. And there's no doubt we have, well, it's always been said, it takes a village, and they're absolutely part of that village. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to public comment. So from what I understand, the public comment that we do have is tied to two of our agenda items, one being around COVID-19, or two being around COVID-19, and one being tied to the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we'll read those then. But that said, is there any public comment, Kim, that is out there that are tied to items that are not included on the agenda?
President Sandoval, no, there are no items that aren't tied to an agenda.
Okay, perfect. So the ones that we do have, we will pause on those until we get to those agenda line items and read those first, and then we'll go through the actual agenda item. And you do have the timer for those public comments, right? That we'll use the 3-minute timer.
Yes, sir, I do.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, moving along to the consent agenda. Board members, any items that you would like to pull? Ms. Doan?
No, thank you.
Ms. Underhill?
No, thank you.
Ms. Pingarelli?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Ms. Seja Martinez?
Yes, 2, please. 6.5, which is the developer assistance, and 6.15, which is the 403B.
Okay. So I'll second those. I do need a motion to approve the consent agenda minus 6.5 and 6.15.
So moved.
So I have a motion by, I believe that was Ms. Doan.
Yes.
Yep. Can you get a second?
I second.
So we have a motion by Ms. Doan, and I believe that was a second by Ms. Seja Martinez. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right. There was another voice in the background, so all right, perfect. Very good. All right. So moving on to, well, actually, we need to cast our votes.
Sorry, President Sandoval, I was moving agenda items. So if I call you, or when I call your name, could you please let me know your vote? This is the motion to approve consent agenda without 6.5 and 6.15. Mrs. Pingarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
Mrs. Doan,
Aye.
Mrs. Seja Martinez,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
Thank you. That has passed, and I will now be moving those items pulled. If you give me just a moment. You should now be able to see those items under 7.1 and 7.2. If you're not able to, you could refresh your screen and go back in. You should be able to see them.
Nope, I can see them on my screen. Everybody else good?
Yep, all good.
Okay, perfect. All right, Ms. Seja Martinez, 7.1, approval of the Estoppel certificate and assignment and assumption of developer assistance agreement.
Thank you very much, President Sandoval and board. I request that we table this, and I want to appreciate and thank Ms. Myers and her administration team for reviewing the documents. We've had some interesting experiences and learning opportunities with developer assistance, and I want to highlight a couple things of the due diligence of the work that was done. Board, that it was confirmed that there are no time restrictions associated with this agreement, no additional payments that will be required as a result of a time frame, and that the land is for elementary or middle school. So at this point, I am comfortable and confident with the work of our administration team to move forward.
thank you for that. So I need a motion to approve 7.1, the Estoppel certificate and assignment and inception of developer assistance agreement.
I move to approve 7.1 as presented.
Second?
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Sam Martinez and a second by Ms. Underhill.
When I call your name, if you could please cast your vote. Mrs. Pingarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
Mrs. Doan,
Aye.
Mrs. Seha Martinez,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
Thank you very much. That motion passed 5-0.
All right, perfect. Moving along to 7.2, Peoria Unified School District updated 403B. Tax shelter deferred compensation annuity plan and adoption agreement. Ms. Martinez?
Thank you very much. Again, this is a topic where I spend most of my time in this area, but I want to highlight, we continually talk about what defines total compensation for our employees. And as a governing board, we haven't got to define the exact definition, but the fact that our school administrators have offer that we as an employer offer a 403B or a tax shelter annuity account, this is part of that full compensation. The work that Dr. Davidson and his team have presented us with in an email highlights the ongoing work since Mr. Sandoval, Ms. Doan, and I started on the board, and it continues to get better. I want to ask going forward as we move and review total compensation that in this 403B space that we continue to track. I know we host meetings, attendance, participation, enrollments, trends, and any future recommendations as we consider total full compensation for our employees, because this is definitely part of that that benefit package.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you for acknowledging that.
I have one question, just one simple one, and that's the reason in the email it does say, and I'm reading through my notes here, the company that we use is AZ 403B Professional Group. They do have education series and learnings that they offer, and it looks like it's at no cost, but when I go online and it says select PUSD, it says reach out to your school district to enroll. So I just wanted to, and it doesn't have to be now, but in the future, making sure that we're leveraging all their free webinars or education series. And if we have to enroll in anything, that it be presented to the board so that we can support that. That's it.
Yeah, perfect. No, thank you for that. I mean, and you're absolutely right. I mean, our compensation models are I think are moving towards being very intentional around a global offering, to all of our associates, and putting them in a position of financial wealth is part of that. So thank you for bringing that out, Ms. Seha Martinez. So I need a motion to approve 7.2 Peoria Unified School District updated 403B tax shelter deferred permanent compensation.
I move to approve 7.2 403B tax shelter deferred compensation annuity plan and adoption agreement.
Second?
We have a motion by Ms. Seha Martinez and a second by Ms. Underhill. Board members, please cast your votes, or Jim, please help us in casting our votes.
Thank you, Mr. Sandoval. I know that you all can do this electronically. This is for the purpose of the audio. So, Mrs. Pingarelli.
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval.
Sorry, aye.
Mrs. Doan.
Aye.
Mrs. Seha Martinez.
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, very good. Moving along to our agenda items. 8.1, consideration of administrative appointments. I need a motion to approve 8.1.
I move to, approve 8.1, consideration of administrative appointments.
I second that.
So we have a motion from Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Seha Martinez. Board members, please cast your votes.
Mrs. Pingarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill,
Aye.
motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you for that. Dr. Davidson, would love to hear a little more about these individuals, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you and good evening, President Sandoval, members of the board, Ms. Powles-Thompson, and guest. Thank you for the motion and the approval of that motion. We're really excited to recognize one external employee and one internal employee who are going to be serving as school principals next year in our school district. I'll start off by reading each candidate's bio, for lack of better terms, and then if you have any questions, I'll certainly stand for any questions. The first one we'd like to recognize is to recommend that Ms. Stephanie Ward be appointed to the position of principal of Desert Palms Elementary School for the 2021 school year. Mrs. Ward currently serves as principal of Palm Lane Elementary School in the Cartwright Elementary School District and has done so since 2015. Mrs. Ward has served as a certified administrator since 2008 and started her career as a classroom instructor in 2002. Mrs. Ward has a bachelor's degree from Arizona State University and 2 master's degrees from NAU in education leadership and secondary education, English, respectively. Congratulations, Stephanie, and welcome to the Peoria Unified School District. Please note that Mrs. Ward also is one of our parents. I believe she has a child up at Sunrise Mountain currently. Next, we'd like to recognize and recommend that Mr. Scott Hollibaugh be appointed to the position of principal of Centennial High School for the 2021 school year. Mr. Hollibaugh currently serves as the interim principal of Centennial High School, and for the past 2 school years was an assistant principal with duties in and around curriculum. Since 2005, Mr. Hollibaugh has also served in roles of teacher and student council advisor at Sunrise Mountain High School and as assistant principal athletic director at Raymond S. Kellis High School. Mr. Hollibaugh has a bachelor's degree from the University of Toledo in secondary language arts and education and a master's degree in education, administrative supervision, and principalship from Arizona State University. Scott, congratulations on your official appointment, and thank you for all you are currently doing and will continue to do on behalf of the entire Centennial and Peoria Unified community. So, governing board members, thank you for your support, and I'll certainly stand here if you have any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Davidson, for that. Ms. Stone?
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Underhill?
I don't have any questions either. I just want to say thanks to both of you for joining PUSD, and we're so grateful to have you.
Ms. Pingarelli?
I just wanted to say welcome to Mrs. Ward and congratulations also to Mr. Hollibaugh. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Seha Martinez?
Thank you for that. And I hope they are listening, Ms. Ward, when I look forward to your innovative ideas to challenge our district, and welcome to our family. And at Centennial, Mr. Hollibaugh, my interactions with you have been professional, and your ability to maintain your composure in all that we've experienced together thus far. I am so grateful, and you're the perfect person for the job. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yeah, I'm going to echo that. I mean, Ms. Ward, certainly looking forward to you bringing best practices and innovative ideas to the district, and your passion, for our youth. And Mr. Allenbaugh, again, my engagement with you as Alman reflected not only your leadership skills to inspire others to work at their best, but also creating supportive environments and influencing innovation and creativity across the school. So looking forward to you moving up to that next level and seeing more of the great leadership that you've exuded over the years. So congratulations. Thank you, Dr. D.
Yes, sir.
All right, so moving right along to 8.2, the Mcpherson and Jacobson contract. And I believe that is being presented by type procedural. Dr. Davidson, sorry. I had to kind of toggle back and forth. So Dr. D.
Thank you again, President Sandoval, members of the board, Ms. Powell Thompson. This agenda item, as you can see, is listed as an action and discussion. This item was brought to us through Mcpherson and Jacobson, and just for those out there, please be reminded that this is the company that we worked with to ultimately go through our most recent superintendent search and hiring process. Phase 5 of their support for this process is ultimately to have probably Dr. Joel come down governing board and work with us as a team, as well as with our newly hired superintendent for next year, Dr. Reynolds, to look at performance objectives and goals for the next year. This is something we wanted to bring to you tonight for conversation and ultimately to decide upon. Is that something you believe we need to pay Mcpherson and Jacobson to do? The sum, and thank you, Ms. Myers, for giving us all the information. It's $2,600 to go through that process. If it's something that you choose to move forward with, and if you choose not to, we'll simply work with the company to modify our invoice and move forward from this point forward. So I'll stand for any or sit for any questions at this point. Thank you.
Sorry about that, I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Davidson, for that. Ms. Doan?
I think we're pretty capable of doing our own testing of our new superintendent and performance goals and stuff like that. I really don't see that we need the additional expenditure. So I'd like to hear from my fellow board members on that one.
Yeah, thank you for that. Ms. Underhill?
Yes, I agree with Mrs. Doan. I think that we've been so fortunate to be able to, get to know Dr. Reynolds, as he's kind of been in our district already, that we've already started to establish a really good working relationship. And I don't think that we need an outside facilitator to further that process. I think we're well on our way. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pingrelli?
Well, I would echo my board members. I just wanted to say in these troubled times, these troubled economic times, I would opt not to go any further with Mcpherson and Jacobson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Sayre Martinez?
Thank you, President Sandoval. I just need some clarity, Ms. Myers, on the original contract in the RFP. Does it require us to move forward, or we can amend it as recommending today?
We can make the recommendation to remove option 5, and we would notify Mcpherson Jacobson of that decision, and they would adjust their billing accordingly.
Okay, so there's no breach of contract?
No, thank you.
I want to say that Dr. Reynolds has definitely had a unique onboarding experience, and we have been privileged to have our superintendent and our deputy superintendent, now superintendent in the near future, work side by side. And I'm confident that this board can identify measurable outcomes and goals as we've worked hard in the past couple of years through that process. So I'm in support with the majority of the board.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would agree. I think, Dr. Reynolds' ability to sit in, the seat that he's in now, and really, walk side by side, with Superintendent Pallas Thompson and really become acclimated into our district, right? It's been a grand opportunity, for him to do so. And from a board relations perspective, I think to this point, and I have no doubt that it'll continue along this trajectory, is just willingness to, be very inclusive, with the board, on decisions throughout the district. And I agree with, in that regard with Ms. Underhill and with Ms. Martinez, in and around, establishing those goals that are relevant to move this district, forward, for the next 3, 5, 7 years. So I would agree. I think to Ms. Pingarelli's point, one, in these trying times economically, and two, Dr. Reynolds' ability to acclimate in the district and our ability to really work collaboratively with him and leadership to ensure that those goals, again, are relevant for our 37,000 plus and 4,000 plus associates. So I'm in agreement that I think this is phase 5 is a phase that we can certainly strike, if you will, from the agreement and have them revise that their final invoicing. So Kim, this is a discussion and action. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I mean, with that said, if my fellow board members are in agreement, I would, ask for a motion to, can we, well, the line item is to just Mcpherson and Jacobson contract. Can we get a motion to strike phase 5 from the agreement, knowing that that line item is so broad?
President Sandoval, the motion reads, motion to approve phase 5 of the contract with Mcpherson and Jacobson. I can certainly amend that motion if you would like, or you can vote on it as it is stated to approve phase 5 of the contract. It is up to you, sir.
Gotcha. So we can leave it as is, and I think we can vote accordingly based on our comments. So so I will motion that, well, is that the right thing to do? Sorry, I'm holding this up, but if we motion to approve it, but then we all vote accordingly based on our discussion, based on those votes, we'll determine the outcome of this line item. Yes?
Yes, sir. Actually, I understand your hesitation because it does read you would need a motion to approve. So why don't I amend the motion for you?
Thank you.
So I have amended the motion, Board and President Sandoval, to read motion to remove phase 5 of the contract with Mcpherson and Jacobson.
All right now.
All right, so I need a motion to remove phase 5 from the Mcpherson and Jacobson contract.
I move that we remove phase 5 from the Mcpherson and Jacobson contract.
I will second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by Ms. Pingarelli. Board members, please cast your vote.
Mrs. Pingarelli,
A definite aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
Mrs. Dome,
Aye.
Mrs. Seha Martinez,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0 to remove phase 5 of the contract from Mcpherson and Jacobson.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for your help with that.
You're welcome, sir.
Okay, moving on to 8.3, consideration of approval of rehire list for the issuance of letters of reasonable assurance for classified staff for the 2020-2021 school year. So Dr. Davidson?
Hello again, President Sandoval, members of the board, Ms. Powell Thompson, and guests. This particular item is very similar to the one you saw early in March for our certified team and our administrative team. Our recommendation and hope tonight is that you would be able to approve the rehire list for our classified team members, both exempt and non-exempt. And then on Monday, we will issue their letters of reasonable assurance with them hopefully being signed and returned electronically, securing their jobs for the next school year. So that would, again, I'll be here for any questions.
Yes, thank you for that. Ms. Doan?
Can I go ahead and make the motion? I'm for it. We need to discuss this.
Sure. You can absolutely make a motion.
All right. Well, then I move that we approve the rehire list and authorize the renewal of letters of reasonable assurance for classified employees for the 2020-2021 school year.
I will second.
Thank you for that. Board members? Please cast your votes.
Mrs. Pingarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
Mrs. Dome,
Aye.
Mrs. Seha Martinez,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, Governing Board.
Thank you, sir. Okay, moving along to 8.4, COVID-19 update. I know that's Dr. Reynolds, but before we get into the actual meat of the line item, Ms. Contra, would you mind reading the comments tied to this line item, please?
Yes, sir, I'd be happy to. I am going to start the timer, and I have 2 comments on this agenda item. The first is from Shannon Ramirez. Thank you for all your hard work implementing an online platform for our students. My daughter is a 2020 senior and is a straight A student. She has worked very hard to be ranked in the top of her class and has looked forward to graduation for many years. Please understand how important a graduation ceremony is to her and to the rest of the classmates. It is the single most important achievement in high school. If the original graduation date is not possible, please reschedule the ceremony to a later date to occur as soon as possible. Having graduation completely canceled would be devastating to these young students and their families and should not be a consideration. It is so sad that they are already missing out on the last of their high school activities. Thank you in advance for your understanding of how important the graduation ceremony is to these young people and for doing everything in your power to secure a graduation ceremony.
Thank you for that, Kim. You know, I know we've been using the word postpone around graduation, so I think as a board, we certainly appreciate that. But once again, if you can make sure to contact all these individuals and make them aware of, you know, that their voices have been heard, and you know, and any appropriate responses at that time or any updates that we may have around graduations would be fantastic.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I will do that.
Thank you.
The next comment is from Anna Ramirez. I am a senior at Sunrise Mountain High School. I am so sad that my senior year came to such an abrupt end. the class of 2020 should definitely get the chance to walk at our graduation ceremony. If it is not possible to have the ceremony on the original date, I kindly and humbly request that you please reschedule it as soon as possible. It is so important, and missing it altogether would be terrible. Thank you in advance for your time and your consideration.
Yeah, thank you. And there again, just contact with this individual and making sure that they understand, any updates, around graduation is appreciated. So any other items tied to 8.4, Kim?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you for that. Dr. Reynolds, you are up, sir.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, President Sandoval, Governing Board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, Cabinet, and our listening guests. At our last Governing Board meeting, I presented an in-depth look at Peoria's plan to address school closures and the impact that COVID-19 is having on our students, our families, and our staff. Tonight, I want to give you just a brief update on our progress and introduce the work that we have been doing in the area of the new school year and how we will continue to support our students, our families, and our staff as we come back for the 2021 year. To date, we have now served over 300,000 meals in our food service department. We have distributed over 6,000 laptops to students across the district. And we are continuing to engage our students every day in learning opportunities. Our teachers, our principals are working with our curriculum instruction department, and they are having new discussions about how we do a better job assessing learning and how we provide genuine feedback to our young people in this new learning environment. As I shared with you at the last meeting, our seniors remain our #1 focus. Again, you heard from the public comment how important this is. It's important for everyone to know that we are tracking each of our seniors' progress weekly. And we are doing everything we can to ensure that they complete the work necessary to first and foremost receive their diploma. We are also finding each of our schools are working hard, working with their students, working with their staff to find new and innovative ways to celebrate the class of 2020 and thank them for their hard work. As you heard in the public comment, graduation remains a concern. The status of graduation remains the same. We have moved beyond the May date, and we are now focused on the window of June 30th through July 6th. We are working with State Farm Stadium. We are working with other leaders from across the valley, other superintendents, other principals, and we are exploring all options to ensure that we can host graduation. As I said last time, if we, based on our information from our health officials and from our governor, if we are unable to host at that time, then we will move to Plan C and continue to work with our schools to find a way to celebrate their accomplishments. A couple of other quick facts that I think are really, really interesting and are examples of the work that our team, the work that our administrative team, the work that our teachers, our staff are doing. It really is incredible. We've had over 4,000 participants in our online technology training for staff. And what's really interesting is that we've had over 1,000 student hits on that technical training as well. Our business services department have provided 2,000 refunds so far for families based on canceled events and programs, those kinds of things. So we're working hard to get those refunds back to our families so they can utilize those dollars. We currently have over 12,000 licenses in iReady in both ELA and math. We have offered, since March 23rd, we have offered 128 new certified and principal job offers. for next school year. That's since March 23rd. And what we are most excited about is that we've had an 85% acceptance rates from those offers, which is, again, really exciting. Our Human Resources Department, it is impossible to explain to you the work that team is doing on a daily basis. And today, this afternoon, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, Miss Airy, and I had an opportunity to again meet with our Superintendent Student Advisory. That's a team of student leaders from across the district. They are all seniors, happen to be all seniors this year. And I asked them the question, what do you want me, I was explaining to them that I was giving this update to you, the governing board, as well as our community tonight. And I asked them, what do you want me to share from the student perspective to the governing board? And these are a couple of things that they mentioned. First of all, Wi-Fi remains a challenge across the district. Now, right away, some people might say, well, that might be families that have no Wi-Fi. Like, how do they get access to it? But it's not just our families without Wi-Fi. One of our students was explaining to us how she and her two brothers have to stagger throughout the day as her parents are also using the Wi-Fi, and it becomes a challenge for connectivity. And so they have been working, and they have a good plan in place, but it does remain a challenge. A second item that they wanted to share with you and our community is that intrinsic engagement in learning is a challenge across the district, whether it is in our elementary schools or our high school. When we look at encouraging our students to learn because it is what they need to do and it is what's best for them, that intrinsic engagement remains a challenge. And so they asked our teachers and our principals and our curriculum and instruction department to continue to find ways to motivate students intrinsically. And as well, the final thing that they wanted to make sure that you as a governing board knew is that our teachers, our administrators, our staff at our schools, they are getting better every single day in engaging students in learning. Our students are getting better at it, and it is starting to feel like real learning. They are excited about it and are anxious to see what that continues to look like for us in the future. It's as I mentioned earlier, as a team, as Peoria Schools, we are continuing to support the Peoria and Glendale's communities. Our team continues to work every single day for the same mission, and we are proud of each and every one of them and the work that they are doing. So let's talk about some next steps. As you have heard, Mrs. Pallas Thompson, a couple weeks ago, Mrs. Pallas Thompson called for her second COVID task force and her third Not on My Watch team. This team is called Not on My Watch 3, The Final Frontier, and it is very similar to our first group, except in that this task force is made up of district-wide leadership, and that leadership will be reaching out to various stakeholders across the district to get feedback. Their challenge is, how do we move from where we are now into the 2021 school year? And they are working. The work they have progressed so quickly. And if you think about the scenario that they're facing, right, they are attempting to plan for the unknown. And that is so incredibly difficult to do. So they are working on a variety of scenarios. Examples might be, we start back normally, like we did in the 1920 school year. What will that look like? What happens if we need to start the 2021 school year with some of the same social distancing requirements that we're facing now? What might that look like for a school and for learning and for students, for our staff? And of course, what would it look like if we need to delay the start of the 2021 school year? And now remember, they're also planning for every other scenario that they can think of in between those. This group is specifically focused on the physical and social, emotional well-being of our students and staff, as well as the academics of all grades, pre-K-12, including gaps in learning, new opportunities for engagement, and what might a new online learning platform look like in Peoria schools. Again, we are so proud of the work of the entire community is doing, and we need our community to know that we continue to seek their feedback from all of our stakeholders. So please reach out to us from a district level. Reach out to your schools, your principals, your teachers. Let them know your needs, your desires, the successes, and where we can improve. And it is also important that our entire community know that we are here, we are ready, and we are working hard every day to ensure that every student, every day in the Peoria Unified School District will be prepared to shape tomorrow. Again, President Sandoval Governing Board, our entire team is here to hear your feedback or to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for that very comprehensive update. Ms. Doan? You're on mute, Ms. Doan. And she might have had to step away briefly. So, Ms. Underhill?
Well, thank you, Dr. Reynolds. That was very informative, and it is just absolutely amazing, the work that the district has done and all the things that you've accomplished in really taking care of, our kids and our families and just like the whole child, situation. And I appreciate greatly the work that your team is doing in thinking ahead because, planning in uncertain times is definitely challenging, and it's just great that you're putting that energy so that we're not going to roll into fall not really knowing what's going on, but rather having kind of a plan A, B, and C, and that's great. I had a couple questions around the students' thoughts on the intrinsic engagement, and I know that across the country that's been a real challenge that like 40%, only 40% of kids are even logging in at all, and I think that we're doing pretty well compared to that. Because I think the challenge with this new situation is as a community, as a state, et cetera, we didn't really know how to, make students accountable for their learning when they're in an entirely new and different situation. So, but my question is, are we figuring out how, and are we able to track the engagement of our students? And if so, are we seeing those percentages and trends in those percentages? I'm just curious about that at this point.
Yes, Mrs. Underhill, thank you for your question. Yeah, we have asked our principals, we've asked our teachers to really stay focused and be looking at the data, the engagement data, how many times teachers are able to connect with students, how we're reaching out to families. So they're working really hard to make sure that we're doing our very best to keep those engagement numbers up. I would say anecdotally, we have seen a dip over the last week or two. Students came in, I'm not sure I would describe it as excited, but many of them were excited to reconnect and get some assignments and some activities and really engage with their classmates. But we have seen a dip in that engagement, and so our teams are working hard to figure out how we reinvigorate that intrinsic aspect of learning and how we continue to engage each and every one of our students so that they're doing what they need to do to be prepared as we enter into the 2021 school year.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Another question I had was just around, as we do whatever we end up doing as we phase in or whatever, and parents have to go back to work. And if the schools aren't open, I know that childcare is going to be a concern for many families. Are we working with some of the partners that, you know, that were mentioned and other partners to kind of figure out, you know, how do we address some of the childcare issues in the community? And then this is way out there, but I read an article recently that said that one thing we've learned about this pandemic is that Wi-Fi is a utility. And have we spoken with our city partners about, you know, how we make that more of a reality? Just wondering.
No, again, thank you, Mrs. Underhill. Yeah, both of those issues are real, and we know that are really, really important to our families, our students, our staff, for that matter. So yes, childcare is an aspect of the task force, the final frontier, and we will be absolutely working with our community partners to get that up and running as soon as it is safe to do so. When it comes to Wi-Fi, I have had individual conversations with not only city officials, but also fellow district leaders, as well as superintendents and local partners across the West Valley to make this one of our problems that we need to solve. Mrs. Pallas-Thompson talks about we need to identify the problem if we are going to solve it. We have identified, as you so eloquently put it, we have identified the problem. Now we need our community leaders, we need our state leaders, we need our federal leaders to step up and figure out how we get this utility to all of our students and our families.
That's great. I so appreciate you guys' efforts on all that, because it's, you know, they're big problems, but identifying them as the first step and then building those, or, you know, working with those partnerships. The last question I have is just around the free and reduced lunch program, and, you know, we've been doing an amazing job. I am not that familiar, but as the contracts come up in June, are we seeing any concerns about you know, funding, et cetera, in regard to continuing to provide that service as we approach summer, et cetera?
No, another great question, and I'm just going to shout out to Mr. Dogood to jump in if I don't answer this as accurately as I potentially should be able to. We so far have not seen an interruption to our receiving of supplies. We are confident that the funding will continue to come through. Having said that, a lot can change in a short period of time, and so our team, our food service team, along with led by Mr. Dogood, is continuing to focus on that, continuing to monitor what is happening, and I feel very confident that he and that entire team will be ready and prepared to handle any situations that come our way.
Great, and I am very confident in that as well, but just again, appreciate everything that you all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingrelli?
Well, I just want to thank you, Dr. Reynolds, for the presentation. I just had a question on the engagement data. What type of engagement data are we using?
So it is the schools are charged with monitoring the interactions that their teachers are having with their students. So their teachers are monitoring, you know, if I have 25 students in my classroom, throughout this week, I was able to connect with 20 of them, 5 of them I'm struggling with. And so then we have support teams that are in place, specifically in our seniors, right? So we have our counselors, we have administrators, any seniors who are not connecting as often as they should, we are touching base with them regularly to make sure that they remember and that they understand how important this is. So that data is being monitored by our teachers, our principals, as well as being overseen by our executive directors in the curriculum instruction department.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Pingarelli. Ms. Sayre Martinez?
Yes, thank you, President Sandoval. It's great to hear my fellow board members. I'm on the same track. So I'm going to start where Ms. Pingarelli left off because it transitions. Dr. Reynolds, thank you for all the information. And it sounds like the students too are on my same thought process. So with the data that you are compiling, you mentioned a lot about engagement, and the teachers and the administrators are tracking. What are the efforts around students? Like, are we sending them specific surveys through their Synergy? Are we reaching out to the parents and sending them emails, calling? I know we have a lot of unique staff work environments. Are we putting them on a task where we gather specific questions that we're trying to get answered on topics or anything under the sun? But what data are you trying to compile?
No, it's a great question, Ms. Sayre Martinez. We specifically talked with the students about surveys and what we can do to find out from them what it is that they need. And so they had some really great suggestions on reaching out. We have, from a district perspective, taken a little bit of a step back from our approach. If you remember, when this crisis first hit and our families and our district were faced with the school closures, we were communicating on a what I would call a regular basis. I think some would say that we were over communicating in a good way. And so the feedback we received was, give us, take a step back, we'll touch base after we see where we are with our programming, and now is that appropriate time. And so we've got, I've been talking with our executive directors, and after today, we'll be focused specifically in on students and how we reach out to them and ask them what's working, what's not. It's not just data. We don't just need to collect this data for the next 3 weeks. I really do believe that the information that the students will provide us will help us as we continue to develop an online learning platform for the future.
That's spot on. I wrote that down too. And it goes into my train of thought. I had the opportunity to attend the ADE's emergency roundtable this morning, or this afternoon actually, and they rephrased it as continuity of operations planning. And it's spot on to what does all those pillars look like if it goes back to our new normal or academics and things like that. So your phasing and everything you've highlighted, thank you for that, because that checked off a lot of boxes. And I just want to know that the data that we're collecting is aligned to our strategic planning. What problems do we need to solve? What trends are we noticing? And that we're reaching out to our students themselves. I can attest, I have 2 students, and the communication is a challenge. The other part of it is our parents. Social media platforms, I was looking at the communication. You are correct. I also noticed that it has died down, and this is a great time to re-engage, and not for hype, but for help. I saw that phrase somewhere, and I'll coin that. I'll help. We need to continue to help in our community members in different forms. What trends are we identifying? So just a quick highlight. I saw that I know it's the next agenda item, but the YouTube video, or the video on the Citizens Advisory Committee had 50 views, and that's just within less than 24 hours. The previous week is 291 views. So our community is engaging. I would like to see some of that trending data of what social media platform. Parents are tied into Facebook. Are we engaging in Instagram? How are we tracking that data? Twitter, those kinds of things. My question around risks. What risks have we come across? Any red flags that we have had to pivot?
Yes, absolutely. The obviously the safety of our staff, the safety of our entire community. But when we talk about the safety of our staff who are on the front lines, we have identified some specific needs, in the area of masks. And so right away we reached out. Our nurses group immediately began making masks to give to our specifically our food service workers to try to not only provide them with the mask but educate them on how important it is for those areas. We ordered masks right away. As you can imagine, we've all heard about the backlog. We are excited to be able to announce that our shipment came in, and by Monday we will have those deliveries out to our teams so that they can not only feel better about their safety, but actually be safer in the work that they do. So that's the number one risk that I can identify right away. The other risk that we face, and there are many, but the other one that stands out is, as I mentioned earlier, the learning gaps that are created during this time. We are used to addressing learning gaps from June 1st through August 1st. That 2 months off, and we have lots of students who do activities and continue learning over the summer. We have some students who don't have access to those opportunities, and so this just magnifies that risk. And our team, our curriculum instruction team, as well as all the other support areas, are specifically focused on how are we going to reintroduce students to school, not just academically, but also social and emotionally, potentially, their physical safety as well. But how are we going to adjust? How are we going to ensure that this crisis ends up being a bump in their road, in their path, in their learning, rather than a significant chasm that they have fallen into? So it is our first and foremost priority in both the well-being of our students and staff, and also that risk that we face in their learning gaps.
I appreciate you acknowledging that. I also see, when you say that out loud, two things come to mind. The risk of the class sizes that we've had in the past, to one teacher having to support all those students. Is that something that we should consider going forward into the new year? Is that going to change staffing models? We've highlighted that technology is an issue because you have to alternate Wi-Fi. And if their Teams meetings are at the same time for each class, is that something that is being looked at? Does that make sense?
My answer to your question is, we are exploring all options.
Okay.
Everything is on the table. And Mrs. Pallas Thompson, when she laid out the purpose of this new task force, when she laid out the vision, she was very clear that we need to explore options, leave behind what we know, not leave behind it, but don't rely solely on what we know. Let's look for new opportunities. Let's look for new ways to support our team. So everything is on the option. Of course, as you are well aware, there are many barriers that we face, but we will but we start with the concept of let's throw it all out there, and then let's do whatever we can to find a way to be successful.
Thank you. And the last thing I just want to highlight, it's our staff. I honestly would not like to be in a position if I'm a teacher or a principal and have children of my own. I would like us to really focus on the well-being of our staff and consider a work from home schedule that is flexible. I have not heard any complaints that staff have to be on at 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but that we're really giving and empowering them to saying your time with your children, if your kids are having Teams meetings from X time to X time, we want you to be with them. And if that means you have a work time frame that's later in the evening, then we support you on that. But your children too are just as important as our 37,000 students. And so I am concerned about the well-being of our staff as they balance both personal and home life and the needs of all our students.
Well, let me very quickly just react to that. Mrs. Pallas Thompson, in her unique way to have a finger on the pulse of the people who have dedicated their lives to Peoria schools, she has challenged our team to reach out to every single staff member and find out what same thing we did with our students and our students and our families. What are your needs? What is working? What do you want to celebrate? And how can we help? So right along with exactly what you were saying in your comments, as usual, Mrs. Pallas Thompson is ahead of the game and has challenged us to find ways to better support our team.
All right, well then that sounds like we're on the right track, and I'll end my comments there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. A.R. Martinez. Ms. Stone, were you able to overcome some of your technical difficulties on your end? Yeah, it sounds like Ms. Stone was having trouble with unmuting her laptop or phone. So I don't know what we can do on our end to help her out, but would love to certainly, as we move along the agenda, hear from her or give her the opportunity to speak. So with that said, there's, when I take a look at what we're doing as a district and what many districts are doing, but what we're doing here in PUSD, to adapt to these daily shifts and how we educate our kids, it's just, again, very proud of what everybody is doing across all associates, all verticals. Your ability and really your foresight to understand a lot what Ms. Martinez was saying and Ms. Pringarelli around the data, to understand that these, we're in a time where we can really assess, our district and, our opportunities and certainly our strengths. And Dr. Reynolds, you certainly brought forth, some of those, but it sounds like we're being very thoughtful around gleaning, best practices as we go through this to adapt, as we move forward, even, when COVID-19 is behind us. So again, you're just leading, not leading from behind, is again a strength of this district. Yes, there's COVID-19 and WHO that we have to certainly look at and follow those guidelines, but how you have taken those guidelines and ensure that all of our associates are in safe and supportive work environments, all of our students the same, and continuing to put them in a position to be successful is absolutely a grand example of true leadership. So thank you for that. And with that said, Ms. Underhill brought up the summer months and, making sure that we're still able to take care of our community, from a resource perspective. And again, I brought it up in the last board meeting, where I believe, based on, some, of our families who have been afforded the benefit of, pushing, whether it be their rent or their mortgage, kind of postponing those, for, the next couple of months. But there's going to come a day where, I don't know if it's, and again, I'm sure they'll be, mindful of that and not have some balloon payment. But, I just feel that, we're going to have individuals that are continuing to have need who may not have had needs in the past. So, as we get into our summer months, I just, want to make sure that, we take a look at ways that we can continue to support all of our stakeholders, our communities, and certainly our students, teachers, and staff. That said, from a SEL perspective, and more specifically, our homeless and our McKinney-Vento students, how are the sites doing with, talking and calling on those students on a daily basis and understanding their needs, and addressing those accordingly? And again, it's having the partnership with the city and the Peoria Education Foundation is going to help us build, on those. I'm going to call them pantries, resource pantries. But how is that going? How is our SEL team doing? Not only from a student perspective, but to Ms. Sarah Martinez's point, even supporting our our associates as well. Do you have a pulse on Dr. Reynolds or anyone on the team, Mr. Duguid? I don't know if Kathleen or Michelle are on the line, but would love to hear an update, around how we're continuing to serve our homeless students and how we'll continue to do so over the summer months.
Yeah, President Sandoval, thank you so much. Yes, we are very fortunate to have a McKinney-Vento liaison, and he is absolutely amazing. We have, as part of both task force, the first COVID, as well as working on moving into the 2021 school year, that remains a definite focus. And he has one of the observations that the SEL team has made is how we've always known that there's a tremendous need out there. But one of the comments that was made at our meeting on, I think it was Wednesday, or yesterday, I guess that is now, was that, how do we continue this? We have a student support line that it's called the student support line, but we have many parents call into that. How do we continue to provide this support? How do we continue to provide these resources? And those are the questions that are being asked right now by that entire team. We have learned a great deal. We have identified many other needs where we still have needs with our and how we can support our students. But many of you have brought up a great point. We still need to grow in the area of how we support our staff. We have resources within our benefits department, our human resources department, but we can do a better job communicating. We can do a better job reaching out. We can do a better job finding ways to support the people who've dedicated their lives to our students. So you're exactly right, and all of that remains a major focus of all the teams that are working.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Just two more comments / questions. One is in around athletics, right? I'm not sure if Mr. Ernster is on the line, but certainly, that's one of the many programs, right, that we're proud to have, within our district. We look at fall sports and we look at the potential, as you have your discussions around planning for the fall, right? And you've already talked about the many different scenarios that everybody's kind of thrown up in the wall and trying to figure out what's going to stick, and then kind of go with the flow, if you will, or react, and based on what the data's telling you and based on what the day-to-day is going on with regard to COVID-19. But with regard to athletics, can you talk a little bit about how fall sports, are being discussed and what adaptations we may need to make there.
Yeah, thank you again. Yeah, we are very fortunate to have Mr. Ernster as our district athletic director, as well as all of our athletic directors from each of our sites. It's not only high schools, right? We also have programming at our elementary schools. And so we're looking at that from a variety of perspectives. When your specific question to fall high school athletics, we are working closely with the AIA and what might that look like? As you're well aware, that's part of the planning that we talked about. What does it look like if we can start working with athletes in the next month? What does it look like if we're not allowed to bring groups like that together until August? What does it look like if we have to postpone the fall season? So there's a lot of work there. You're exactly right. We do recognize how important and the tremendous value that athletics bring to the young men and young women of this district. And we are absolutely devastated for our spring athletes and the seasons lost, the opportunities lost there. Our coaches, our athletic directors, our support teams, our parents have done a phenomenal job reaching out to those students and doing what they can to prop them up and support them and celebrate them. But you're exactly right. That remains a significant challenge for us as we head into the fall season.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Last comment is in and around communications. Ms. San Martinez brought that up. In the onset when we were, going through this, I know the board was being copied or at least forwarded a lot of the communications that were going out to the community, et cetera. I don't believe that, those are going out, we're not being copied, but that is one of the ways that we're going to continue to build trust, build healthy connections, with our stakeholders, our community. So, Ms. Martinez is absolutely right. I mean, when we take a look at our target audience, it varies here in the city of Peoria, from a life stage perspective, from a, cultural perspective, resource perspective. I mean, there are just so many outlets out there today that, it is important, for us to have a deep understanding of those audiences and how they prefer to engage with brands / organizations, right? Whether it's through Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, email, phone, right? And even print for that matter. So that said, it's really just a statement in and around being sensitive to the dynamics from a communication regard, and having a deep understanding, of our community, to communicate them via a channel that's they prefer, and even in the language that they prefer to speak in home. So Danielle and team, I know you are very busy in making sure that not only internal communications throughout the teams are timely and complete. So it's and I'm certain the communications coming out from the sites are the same. So keep that up. And again, I think from me to you, as a board, we would love to continue to be copied or at least forwarded those communications so we understand what's being said from the district level. So we're all speaking the same language and on the same page.
Thank you, President Sandoval. We will absolutely make sure that continues to happen. And thank you for highlighting many of the conversations and the work that is going on with Miss Ari and her entire team, as well as our leadership across the district. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Ms. Stone? Still no Ms. Stone.
Mr. Sandoval, this is Mr. Gay. I've noticed that Robert has been working with Ms. Stone about leaving and coming back in the to join the meeting. She's just, for some reason, her unmute button isn't working on her laptop. I don't have a recent status. I've asked Robert for that, but I have not heard back from him in the last few minutes.
Okay. I'm not sure, based on, board governance and protocol, how we can re-engage her. Maybe it's that last line item on the agenda, but hopefully we get her back soon, and we can definitely hear some comments from her around this particular line item. Board members, any other comments, questions for Dr. Reynolds about the COVID-19 update? No? Perfect. Dr. Reynolds, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you to you, President Sandoval, and the entire governing board again for your support and your feedback. It's well received and incredibly valuable. So thank you.
Absolutely. All right, moving right along to 8.5, the Citizens Advisory Committee updates. Now, before Ms. Myers and Mr. Duguid speak on this line item, Ms. Contra, I believe we have public speak tied to this. Yes?
Yes, sir. Thank you, President Sandoval. We do have one public comment, and that is from Miss Jill Melarani. And I will start the timer now and read her comment. Good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, and Superintendent Linda Pallas Thompson. I am Jill Melarani, a Frontier Elementary parent. First, thank you so much for all that you do. I have the utmost respect for your service to our district. I have been intently watching and listening to the Bond and Override Committee's findings and discussion, and would like to ask again that you consider consolidating some of the schools in the southern part of our district. I understand that the hesitation is that parents would not want to move their children from neighborhood schools. However, have you asked them? I think that if my school had any issues, as some of these schools have, I would leap at the chance to have a brand new school instead of Band-Aid bonds that are not passing. I was fortunate to serve on the previous committees, and the tour we took of those campuses was just heartbreaking. Some of the facilities do not meet minimum safety standards, not to mention dilapidated auditoriums, taped together band instruments, among other numerous issues. Additionally, if we were to close these schools, we would be closer to addressing the overcapacity issue in the northern part of our district. As finally, in line, closer to getting to the 20% total overage required by the SFB. Finally, in line with the utilization report, we are doing a huge disservice to ourselves when you look at the cost to bring these severely underutilized schools back up to level we expect as parents and taxpayers. My personal opinion would be that we go out for 13% override this election cycle before our district loses $9 million more dollars. Further, I ask that you put together a comprehensive bond that our community will support starting immediately after the election this year, giving you plenty of time. If possible, you could work hand in hand with that committee rather than waiting for the recommendation. We need a bond on the ballot that all 5 of you will support. I appreciate your time and consideration, and I hope that you and your families are happy, healthy, and safe.
Yeah, thank you, Kim, for reading that, and Ms. Melanari, thank you, for always being very engaged with PUSD and being very intentional and mindful of what the district is going through. So, Ms. Contra, if you can make sure that any updates that we get from 8.5, I know we're talking about 2 separate committees, but there's no doubt that that's definitely an important subject that we need to absolutely get into discussion with. That said, Ms. Myers, Mr. Duguid, 8.5 Citizens Advisory Committee update.
Well, good evening, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the work of the Citizens Advisory Committee to date. And we'll go ahead and move to the next slide, please. In January of 2020, the governing board did reconvene the Citizens Advisory Committee. And you'll recall that the purpose of this committee is to provide a recommendation to the governing board regarding calling for a bond and/or override election on Tuesday, November 3rd. And if there is the recommendation for a bond and/or override question, the associated or corresponding amounts and percentages would also be part of the recommendation to the governing board. As a reminder, we do have 11 committee members who consist of both parents and representatives from our community, from our families and taxpayers within the district. And if we move to the next slide, as a reminder as well, we did start meeting in February, and around the middle of March, when the COVID-19 crisis hit, we unfortunately did have to cancel 2 meetings. And the reason for that is our Citizens Advisory Committee meetings are subject to open meeting law and are agendized and managed in a very similar manner to our governing board meetings. And it did take a couple of weeks for us to come up with an online format that is very similar to the format we're using this evening for virtual meetings. And so we were able to start meeting again on April 22nd, which, excuse me, was last week, rather. And then we also have our meeting that just took place last night. And then we've got a meeting scheduled for next week. We've added a meeting the first week of May, as well as the standing meeting that was already scheduled for May 13th. And I have to correct where I misspoke, and I caught myself reading the slide. I'm missing a date in there, and so let me go back and correct my statement. We added a meeting on April 15th, and that's when we started meeting again. We then had a meeting yesterday. We have a meeting scheduled next week, a meeting on May 6th, and then again May 13th. The meetings are streamed live, and they are also recorded on our district website, so our community can watch them while they're occurring or after the fact. So back in February, when we started meeting, we did have guest presenters at the meeting, starting with Stifel, Nicholas and Company, the district's bond underwriter, and we had presentations on district assessed valuations and tax rates associated with bond and override scenarios, as well as an overview of how the SFB does fund new school construction, and also a presentation on how to read a property tax statement, as well as the state aid credit and how that is calculated. In March, we did have a presentation from Applied Economics, which did generate enrollment demographic reporting data for the committee, as well as just last week when we met on the 15th of April, ADM Group and Think Smart Planning provided the facility assessment and utilization study results to the committee. So I mentioned we have 3 meetings on the docket. And there's a lot of work to do during that time frame. The first is the decision regarding our override and associated percentages related to a ballot question in November of 2020. If that override question is not passed, we do face the reality of having budget cuts the following year because override approval, is in place for 7 years. And if it is not renewed by the community in year 5, it does start to phase out in year 6. 1/3 of the amount would phase out, and then 2/3 in year 7, and it's fully eliminated in year 8. So what that means for Peoria Unified is we received $27.8 million of additional maintenance and operations funding from our current override. And if not renewed, it will begin to phase out. So that's something that the committee is looking at in depth, as well as discussions related to a critical needs, or sometimes called a bridge bond, versus a comprehensive bond, which would include new school construction. And then the decision to have 2 ballot questions or 1. The Citizens Advisory Committee has asked at several meetings for input from the governing board regarding governing board priorities related to final recommendations that will be forthcoming in May. On April 15th, the results of the facility utilization and capital outlay studies were provided, and there was subsequent discussion by the committee. And the scope of the committee is the recommendation of whether or not to have an override and or bond ballot question in November. decisions and recommendations related to boundaries or facility modifications would be the scope of a separate committee. And so that has been discussed and is being mentioned tonight, that some of those outcomes and opportunities from the facility utilization report would indeed transition to a new committee who would be focusing on those next steps outside of the recommendation for the bond or override questions. The governing board will continue to receive updates via written reports with the Friday report format that we've been using, as well as the periodic governing board meeting updates. Minutes from each committee meeting are also available to the public on the district's website. And as I mentioned earlier, the meetings are recorded and available for the public to view during the meeting or after the meeting. And the Citizens Advisory Committee is on track to make a recommendation to the governing board by the last meeting in May. And the reason why that timing is critical is Maricopa County elections do require formal notification by June 6th in order to allow the district to be on the November ballot. Next slide, please. And that concludes the Citizens Advisory Committee update this evening. I am available to answer your questions, as well as Mr. Duguid.
Thank you, Ms. Myers, Mr. Duguid. Ms. Stone, are you available now?
President Sandoval, they're still having technical difficulties.
Okay. You know, Kim, if you don't mind, I mean, when she's available, I'm sure I'll see her on screen, but if you get a notification, if you could just let me know. I just want to make sure that I acknowledge her and give her the time.
Yes, sir, I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Underhill?
I just wanted to say again that I really appreciate the time and effort that the volunteers and the staff are putting in on this. I've listened to the last 2 meetings, and there's, significant information, which is fantastic. And I know that the committee has a lot to digest in between meetings. So, and I'm trying to do the same thing. So just appreciate you keeping it moving. I know it's a swift pace, but I feel like we're, going to be able to get some really a good recommendation based on the work that you're doing. So just appreciate your effort.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingerelli?
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to also thank the committee. I know that this is a very time-intensive undertaking, and the board doesn't take it lightly. The amount of work that goes into this. I will be going back and listening to yesterday's meeting, but I don't have any questions or comments at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pingerelli. Ms. Sehar Martinez?
Thank you, President Sandoval. A couple things. Yes, just to reiterate, it is a heavy, heavy lift, and we are alongside all the committee members and understand all the data that you have gone through. And Ms. Myers, thank you for leading that charge. A couple things I want to continue to ask, consider to engage is we are in a new norm, and this is the first set of meetings where we've had on YouTube. I would encourage that we continue to blast these YouTube's recordings on every single platform to engage with our community. This is an opportunity where social media platform is at the highest. Also, public comment. We've had some challenges in the past where our community feels like they've been left out, and now we have an opportunity to solicit that public comment from the comfort of their own home. So I would encourage that we continue to leverage those options of soliciting continued public comment since these meetings are recorded. Ms. Myers, you did mention that these agenda items and these meetings do follow open meeting law. The challenge that I'm facing is that these materials are not posted so that I could follow along. So I have received some feedback of where these documents are, like the study utilization, the reports that are being presented prior to the meeting, so that they can ask or facilitate public comment aligned to those items. Is there a reason why those documents are not uploaded prior to the close of public comment option?
Well, Mrs. Aja Martinez, thank you for that question. We do normally have the goal to publish the materials prior to the day of the meeting. Because of the quick turnaround that we had having two Citizens Advisory Committee meetings back to back, working also with outside consultants for some of the information. We didn't get all of the information back until the morning of the meeting. So yes, in the future, it will be posted the day before. So this was just an anomaly because we were still compiling the information the day of the meeting. But the agenda was posted within the 24-hour requirement for the public meeting posting.
That's correct. Thank you so much for enlightening on this. And you're right, we're facing a lot of new challenges, and I appreciate the community as well being patient as we continue to work through these obstacles. The documents that were presented to the community, are they available now on the online so that they can look at them after the fact?
They should be. I'll ask Mrs. Aries' department to confirm that. Mr. Colley assists with that activity.
Excellent. Okay, so going forward with the meat of the content, I echo my colleagues. We were able to listen in on the diverse conversations and lenses. I would like the facilities utilization had a lot of content to consider when the time comes to have a study session. It sounds to me like the committee members also have some questions for the board to identify priorities with this new information that we were just presented. So I will be asking in the future at the end of this board meeting that we schedule a study session as soon as possible to talk through some of those things. In addition, considering the last Citizens Advisory Committee, each member of the committee also identified where they stand. So I would encourage the board members that haven't listened to it to do so, which brings me to my question is, when you say 13% of override, if we consider that same amount, Ms. Myers, is that based on the same recommendation that was presented to the board last year or last time? The items. I know we had 15, and so, but the line items.
President Sandoval, Mrs. Aja Martinez, members of the governing board, the committee has not yet finalized a recommendation on the line items or the areas that are supported within the override for a potential override question for November of 2020. You'll recall that last year, when the recommendation was made, there were two options that were brought forward. A 15% option was ultimately approved, and the 15% included the same line items, support areas, as the 13% override, with an additional support area that was added for school safety related positions and training. So the committee is evaluating the categories that are currently within the 13% override. They've also looked back to when we received approval for that override back in November of 2015, and all-day kindergarten was added and staff compensation as an example. So to answer your question, the committee could certainly consider the same categories, or they could recommend an addition or modification.
Thank you for spelling it out for me. So for me, when I think about our new environment, and I continually hear a 13% override, but we've also been exposed to what is essential. Unfortunately, some of our students have not participated in athletics because there's obviously a stay at home, stay safe ordinance going on. But what is crucial and at risk, as Dr. Reynolds identified, are the academics. So if we were going to continue to look at a 13%, I would ask that our committee remove those non-essential items, potentially athletics and items that are not essential to the well-being of our staff and students, and focus on those academics, still keeping at the 13%, but moving larger buckets of money to staff. And that's just for consideration. I know with the bond, they've asked for more direction. I believe that the board needs to get together to identify what are our priorities based on this new information. And that's where I stand.
Thank you, Ms. Sayo Martinez, for that. Ms. Myers, I would thank you again. I was able to sit on the last two advisory meetings, so certainly it's invaluable to be able to do so, right? To listen in and understand where everybody's mind is at with regard to the bond and override. That said, and one of the things that I've commented on, even through last year is, again, since being elected to the board, we needed a bond, before my time, right? And now we're in a situation where, yes, we need an override without question. So for me, as we take a look at prioritizing the line items, there's no doubt that we're realizing a lot of learnings due to COVID for sure, and how we reinvent ourselves, as we move forward. But that said, fundamentally, I think absolutely they're the needs that we needed for the most part, right? Not all, but for the most part, are those line items are becoming more critical, right? Because we haven't been able to pass the bond, and now we're looking at this override. So, what I haven't heard in those meetings, and again, I don't know if this is appropriate yet or if it's going to take place, but there's a lot of data that we understand with regard to the community and really the voters and their prioritizations, and even opportunities to ensure that the voters fully understand, clearly the impact that the district has, on, our community and the city here in Peoria and all the cities that we serve. So, I mean, I think understanding, kind of where our voter base is, and really more importantly, is understanding those who didn't vote and understanding why, right? Because I think we may run into a situation where potentially, I think individuals who vote will typically vote no, on these measures, may still do so. But I think one way to overcome that is it's a numbers game, right? Getting more people to vote for one, and yes, more yes votes. So again, building on that voter base, I think is going to put us in a situation to be successful. I mean, we got real close with the override. So gleaning best practices from that, last year, and then, applying, some of the other new knowledge that we may have as it relates to really educating, our voting community on the district and its impact, right? So that said, I guess for me, I know we're looking at having a final recommendation on May 28th, but I'll be honest, and I believe my fellow board members would appreciate this, and I know this is putting a lot of pressure on you and team, but I would appreciate, having a recommendation on the 14th, allowing some feedback so we can finalize it on the 28th. I don't, and again, knowing that June 6th is that, absolute drop dead date that we need to have this registered with the county, I just feel that, having that additional meeting for the board to be able to absorb the recommendation, make some comments, and being able to truly finalize it on the 28th, would be appreciated. So thank you again for all your work in this process, and you know, we'll do this together, and you know, we'll certainly overcome. Appreciate it. Any other comments, board?
Yeah, President Sandoval, I just had one more, I guess it's a question for Ms. Myers. We were talking about the categories of the override. You know, in this uncertain time, you know, we may be discussing what people feel are essential or not essential, and that may change over a period of 7 years. Is there any way to do, you know, modifications within an override at all as time goes forward?
The voter approval identifies the areas that can be funded from the override. So your point is well taken. Needs do change, but I will say the categories that we've had in place for a number of years have been consistent. Assistant principals, nurses, athletics and extracurricular activities, arts education and music, gifted programs, reading, maintaining class size, all-day kindergarten. As an example, we've had an override in place going back to 1996. So I think committee recommendations in the past and ballot questions have had some consistent categories, but you know, in our current environment last year, the committee felt it was very important to add safety related positions, as well as M&O eligible expenses in that area, for instance, training, professional development. So your point is well taken, and I can certainly share that with the committee, as well as President Sandoval's request if there could be a recommendation on May 14th. I believe the more priorities that the governing board can help identify for the committee will help expedite the committee's work with the final recommendation.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I just, you know, it's just challenging, I know, just because we're in an uncertain time, but I don't want us to, you know, put ourselves in a place where we can't make changes as our community comes back into a, you know, a new normal. So yeah, just appreciate you, you know, kind of sharing that consideration. And if we are changing categories and those kinds of things, I definitely think that we want to continue to promote these meetings, et cetera, so we can get additional feedback from the community. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Any other questions, comments? Ms. Myers, thank you very much for your time. Okay, moving right along to our next line item, 8.6, budget team update. That is Ms. Myers again.
Well, thank you, and I'll say good evening again, President Sandoval and members of the governing board. Mrs. Pallas Thompson, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on our other team that's been working diligently this spring. That's our budget team, and recommendations that they have made to date regarding our fiscal year 2021 budget process. And tonight's presentation is a continuation of information that was shared during the April 9th governing board meeting. And this evening, I will provide updated budget information from a state and district planning perspective. I will also share updated budget team recommendations and special considerations that should continue to be at the forefront of the district's decision making. At the January 4th, 2020 governing board retreat, the board began to discuss governing board goals and priorities to identify an overarching compensation model for all employee groups with a phased-in approach to defined compensation outcomes. In addition to the formal goals and priorities, there has been input from the governing board and superintendent with a focus on teacher compensation levels that support recruiting and retaining quality staff, beginning teacher salaries, and prioritizing classified staff. And all of these priorities have been shared with the budget team throughout the meeting scheduled this spring. It was also noted as an important consideration that a multi-year plan be developed to identify compensation goals and actionable steps to achieve these goals within the constraints of available funding. I have previously shared with the governing board that there have been 2 approvals to date for fiscal year 2021 compensation recommendations related to retention stipends and benefit renewals, with additional considerations being introduced on April 9th and this evening for governing board possible action in May. On April 9th, I shared information on the Arizona Base Support Level budget and potential fiscal year 2021 revenue shortfall concerns totaling $1.1 billion. That could vary $500 million in either direction, that had been just published by the Joint Legislative Budget Committee due to COVID-19 pandemic concerns and impacts on state revenue levels specifically related to sales tax. The very next day after our April 9th board meeting, on April 10th, the Joint Budget Legislative Committee published its classroom site fund calculations for fiscal year 2021, and the calculations do reflect the decreased revenue projections due to lower state tax revenues in the 4th quarter of the fiscal year, as well as continuing concerns into fiscal year 2021. The classroom site fund, also known as Prop 301, has been in Arizona revised statutes for almost 20 years and accounts for a portion of the state sales tax collections and state trust land income to provide funding for certified teachers, compensation, and performance pay. The estimated amount for fiscal year 2021 is $425 per weighted student. Now, this is a $9 decrease from the $434 per weighted student amount that's in place this current year. It's important to note, and this is bolded on this slide, that the fiscal year 2021 amount includes a new component that has not been in prior classroom site fund calculations. The $425 amount includes a statewide one-time payment of $50 million or $40 of additional funding per weighted student that is part of the 5% final year of funding for the 20% by 2020 teacher salary increase. I did mention this at the last meeting, and I'm pointing it out again because this one-time funding in classroom site fund is something that will be in M&O in the future. It was a one-time part of the 3-year funding, and without this additional infusion, the actual reduction would be $49 per weighted student count, which is an $11 reduction from fiscal year 2021. Next slide, please. So this is in the record books. This is the calculation for next year, and it's anticipating the reduction in sales tax revenue in the new year. So to summarize, the fiscal year 2021 classroom site fund funding numerically on these 2 slides, it shows the one-time payments in classroom site fund for year 3 of the 20% by 2020. That's the box to the left. And that amount actually reduces the reduction as a whole to be $761,000 for the year. So it's actually propping up the funding. And as I previously shared, the district and the budget team is recommending that instead of using the one-time funding from classroom site fund, we would recommend to actually take that difference from our carry forward, a one-time use because it's going to be funded in M&O next year, of $1.7 million to fully fund our certified teachers in year 3 of the 20 by 2020, the 5% from M&O. And that way it's in the base and subject to future compensation increases. And we will leave the funding amount, that one-time infusion, in funds 11 and 13, and it would ultimately be part of the ongoing carry forward in the fund. Next slide, please. The district's classroom site fund carry forward balances in funds 11 through 13 have increased over the last 3 years, with a large portion of the increase in fiscal 19 due to a review of Function 2000 certified positions and the movement of these positions into M&O instead of classroom site fund due to the certified staff not being coded to Function 1000 and with the student roster. And the board may recall that we did bring this as an agenda item in consent last September. And also as a reminder, funds 11 and 13 are used for base compensation, and fund 12 is performance pay. Next slide, please. So to summarize, and we have a couple of views, if you will, or lenses to solidify what I've just said, due to the 11% reduction in the classroom site fund funding for next year, the budget team modified their recommendation for classroom site fund increases to be reduced to 2.5% instead of the 10% amount that we recommended on April 9th. So the budget team, when we've reconvened, they felt that we should lower that amount, and that was the vote that was in place. This would also allow the equivalent of a 2.5 increase for eligible certified function 2000 staff who had previously been in classroom site fund to receive that same amount, but instead of from funds 11 and 13, it would be funded from M&O. And the average increase to be paid for an average teacher salary would be an increase of $109 a year. Next slide, please. The budget team also modified their recommendation to not have any increases for certified staff performance pay for next year. And this also coincides with the original April 9th recommendation that there will not be any changes for administrative performance pay. Based on evolving information related to economic factors for next year, the fiscal year 2021 budget pro forma that was previously presented on April 9th has been updated. I will also share statistical information to consider in conjunction with the updated budget team recommendations for compensation increases. Budget revenue projections have been updated to remove the $2.5 million of fiscal year 2020 ADM growth that COVID-19, we felt very strongly that the ADM increases that we experienced this year would continue next year. So we're taking a conservative position, and we're removing the current year ADM growth to have our amounts flat going back to the end of fiscal 19. We also are going to add back $750,000 for our estimate of new hire staff who will not be eligible for fiscal year 2021 compensation increases because they will not have worked for the district at least 50% of the year, as well as to add a capital to M&O transfer option of $1 million to support staff compensation increases. And as I mentioned earlier, we are recommending using a one-time M&O carry forward amount of $1,719,613 for the portion of the 20% by 2020 funding that is in the classroom site fund for 1 year, which is in fiscal 2021. Next slide, please. Projected expenses have also been updated to remove the optional teacher workday from M&O, and that optional day that our certified teachers have the opportunity to utilize is budgeted at $552,000. And so we've removed it from the M&O expense pro forma, and the budget team is recommending that it be paid for from another eligible cash controlled funding source. An example of that might be indirect costs. For 1 year, they are still recommending that it be added as a permanent day in fiscal year 22 based on available funding. And also within the expense pro forma, there's the matching classroom site fund 2.5% compensation increase for function 2000 staff with a cost of $183,189 and a $1.4 million expense to increase our minimum certified teacher salary to $40,114. You might recall from the April 9th presentation, we walked through the calculation of once you looked at the increase in classroom site fund for certified teachers who were not at that minimum threshold of $40,114, what would the cost be out of M&O to bring them up? Of course, that cost has gone up because the classroom site fund percentage has gone down, but it is an amount that can be included in this pro forma based on the new revenue projection amounts that I shared on the prior slide. And if we move to the next slide, the capital budget projections have been updated to reflect a $1 million transfer from district additional assistance, also known as capital, to M&O, which is a permissible transfer, which would leave $13,689,794 available for department, school facility, and maintenance, as well as technology needs in fiscal year 2021. We're receiving an additional $2.8 million in capital this year. I mentioned on April 9th that the restoration acceleration, where pre-COVID-19 there was discussion of providing the restoration fully for years 4 and 5 in fiscal year 2021. That's now been walked back, where we would receive 1 year of funding, and that difference is about $2.8 million. But we have seen an acceleration of the restoration, where there has been 3 years of restoration in 2, and then we were thinking we would be fully restored next year. Now we're going to have 1 year of restoration and would expect year 5 the following year. Next slide, please. Tonight's presentation includes statistical information for reference purposes, including the number of filled positions by function for certified, classified, and administrative staff, as well as the cost of a 1% salary increase for administrative staff. Next slide, please. We have also included percentage increase costs for all employee groups from a compensation increase perspective for vacant and filled FTE positions, as well as a snapshot of the average salary of full-time positions that are filled for each employee group. Next slide, please. For comparison purposes, I also went back to our budget recommendations for fiscal year 2019. And some of the board members and our community may recall that we had our compensation increases presented in this format. And I actually took the Excel slide from that presentation, and that's for reference here, fiscal year 2019, which is year 1 of the 20 by 2020. And then I have a comparison snapshot. That's our current year, fiscal 2020. And also within that are the percentage increases for other certified, classified, and administrative employees that have received previous increases in the area of classroom site fund or retention stipends, as well as the optional day being added in fiscal year 2019. So it's a good comparison to show the movement and the changes between the 2 years. And if we move to the next slide. After our meeting on April 9th, and with the updated economic forecast from the state of Arizona, we did schedule 2 additional budget team meetings, and those meetings took place on April 13th and April 16th, and the team, between the 2 meetings, I believe we met for 6 hours. So there was a lot of additional information that was reviewed, and conversation among all of the groups, sharing perspectives, and then voting for updated recommendations for the governing board. Next slide, please. And so with those recommendations that came to fruition on April 16th, and the 3 options that I'll walk through tonight were supported by a majority of the committee, the budget team. The first option mirrors in some ways the recommendation that was made on April 9th, which would be compensation increases at 5% for all employee groups. You'll note on the slide I'm summarizing some of the recommendations I've already highlighted earlier in the presentation. The 2.5% increase from classroom site fund, funds 11 and 13, as well as the M&O portion for function 2000 staff. No change in performance pay for certified or administrative staff, as well as the one-time modification for the optional teacher workday that has been in place, and this is the 3rd year that is being recommended again by the committee, that the cost, which is estimated to be $552,000, would be paid out of a non-M&O funding source for just 1 year and then reconsidered as permanent the following year. And in addition to that, the recommendation would be to increase certified staff teacher minimum salary to $40,114, and that's reflective of the effective salary schedule that we looked at on April 9th. However, the cost of the 5% for all categories is actually in excess of the amount of revenue that has been calculated and identified on the prior slide, and it would necessitate adding an additional $107,209.34 of transfer of capital budget funds to M&O to support the total cost of the 5% across the board salary increase. Next slide, please. So as the budget team looked at options, including the 5% across the board that they continually revisited, intrinsic compensation opportunities were discussed. And one area was vacation days as a form of compensation. And so that variable was added to the discussion to evaluate if a 5% increase was not approved for administration, would there be an opportunity to offset a percentage increase with perhaps additional vacation days? Next slide, please. So with that as part of the discussion, the team came up with a second option that includes the criteria of the first option that I walked through in detail, with the exception of the compensation increases now being 5% for certified function 1000 classroom teachers, 5% for certified function 2000 staff, as well as 5% for classified and 4% for administrators. And with that, that would include the addition of 3 vacation days being provided to administrative staff in lieu of the 1% monetary increase. Next slide, thank you. And the third option approved by the budget team is the same as option 1, with the exception of the compensation increases being 5, 5, 5, 3, with the 3% change being for administrators, and the addition of 6 additional vacation days in lieu of the 2% decrease from 5% to 3%. And with that last option, actually options 2 and 3, the cost is actually less than the available revenue. With option 2, the cost is less by $22,234. So that would reduce, in theory, you could reduce the transfer from capital to M&O, or use that available funding for another purpose. And with option 3, it reduces the transfer from capital to M&O by $151,677. Next slide, please. So for comparison purposes, as I mentioned a few slides back where I had that snapshot from fiscal 19 and our current year fiscal 20, I've now embedded the 3 options into an at-a-glance slide for comparison purposes. For year 3 of the 20% by 2020 certified teacher compensation increases, as well as the percentage increases for other certified staff, classified, and administrative employee groups, as well as the associated classroom site fund and retention stipend changes. So it does show that there has been movement. An example would be with the retention stipends for classified, as well as our classified compensation increase went up last year as an example. And so if we move to the next slide, and I've highlighted this earlier in the presentation, to be eligible for compensation increase, staff will need to have been in their position for more than 50% of the work calendar. This is per policy to be eligible for a raise. And also embedded in the recommendation is continued professional growth for all groups at the fiscal year 2020 levels. And the budget team and administration, we have been talking about multi-year plans. We've referred to it as a 1-year, 3-year, 5-year plan, or continued focus on multi-year compensation strategy. And so the budget team and administration have started to put pen to paper with this, identifying goals. Again, in year 1, the message that we heard was certified teachers being able to attract, recruit, and retain qualified certified staff, and that our classified team members were a priority as well. And so this multi-year plan aligns with the governing board's goals and priorities to identify an overarching compensation model for all employee groups with a phased-in approach to defined compensation outcomes, with the caveat that it has to be within the constraints of available funding. Next slide, please. The budget team and administration have also discussed at length the impacts of COVID-19 and the effect on the economy. A question I keep posing is, will the recovery period be rapid or prolonged? That's the essential question, and that will affect the state of Arizona from a funding perspective. And then, as we spoke about earlier tonight, the district's 13% M&O override, that if it's not renewed, will start phasing out. That's $27.8 million of funding that's at stake. That's within our M&O budget. Next slide, please. Tonight's agenda item was for information purposes, and administration does plan to bring back combined recommendations that have been shared on April 9th. And tonight, we'll bring those recommendations back to the governing board on May 14th, as well as updated relevant information that we have from the state and any factors related to our budget or the economy. And those recommendations will be available for the governing board's consideration and possible action on May 14th. And with that, this concludes the presentation, and I am available to answer your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Myers, for the, again, very comprehensive presentation around these budgets, and thank you for the additional options to take a look at. That said, Ms. Underhill, you have any questions, comments for Ms. Myers?
Sorry, I was flipping back and forth between the slides. We've had lots of questions, go back and forth, and I greatly appreciate your clarification on the various things. I feel like we are going in the right direction. I know it's a challenge to try to meet, our goals, especially in this uncertain time, and when we know that we're already facing cuts and don't know what those will look like in the future. I do appreciate the fact that the committee continue to support the increase of the new teacher or the minimum teacher salary. I think it's very critical that we try to get to the market rate, and I know that doesn't address compression like we would like it to, but I appreciate that is, in sort of our next phase. I appreciate the work that we've done with our classified to try to give those increases as well, and the continued work to reclassify those positions as needed. So, and I also just want to say that, I appreciate the consideration of the 5% increase across the board. I know that, it's challenging because obviously the level of what that looks like in dollars is different, but I also believe that, our leadership is critical, and it has shown that to be the case during this time. So I just think that we really need to do whatever we can, knowing that, things may change and we may have to go backward, but we really need, well, hopefully not backward, but we really need to, commit and show that we are committed to moving forward like we have suggested in our goals. So just appreciate your diligence, and I know we're not, moving this forward, but do appreciate the recommendations that the committee has made, or the options.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingrelli?
I just also wanted to thank the committee for their time. We had asked for options last time, and they have provided them this time. So I appreciate that. I have no questions at this point.
Thank you, Ms. Pingrelli. Ms. Sayre Martinez?
Thank you, President Sandoval. Ms. Myers, I do want to acknowledge we got these reports on Monday, and the board had rapid fire of questions, and I can imagine the amount of time and extra time you've taken to be diligent in answering all our questions with your team. So please, let me just highlight, I acknowledge that extra time and effort to answer all the board's questions, and echo my colleagues' sentiment with the committee themselves doing their due diligence and giving us options. I do want to take a step. I received some feedback from administrators, and I appreciate the courage to be candid and direct. And I want to make sure that I honor that some of the questions the board had asked as much time as possible, and we even floated the time frame around of May 29th. But what was brought to my attention, board, was such delay in these types of decisions could hinder a recruiting and attraction piece. I know there was a statistic thrown around today by Dr. Reynolds, about 85% have agreed to accept a contract of the unknown, and we are gracious and appreciate that trust. I do need to ask, is there a trend that Ms. Myers or Dr. Davidson seeing as a result of a delayed time frame that we are exposing our district to missed opportunities on fulfilling positions? Does that make sense?
Thank you, President Sandoval, Mrs. Ceja Martinez, members of the board. I'm sure that Dr. Davidson will also comment. My comment will be our deadline for staff to return contracts has passed, and so staff have signed and committed, knowing that the contract at that point had the fiscal year 2020 salary. Dr. Davidson, would you like to add any comments on attrition related to the timing of compensation increases being approved?
Sure. Thank you, Ms. Myers and Ms. Ceja Martinez. You know, there's a couple of things I think that I just want to share. I think that because of the process we've been doing over the last few years, our current staff is familiar and aware of how the budget team works and how the governing board works alongside us. So I think certainly that's in our favor. Also, I do believe the times that we're in with COVID-19, that certainly that does impact an employee's desire, perhaps, or even there's certainly a level of uncertainty right now. So I do think our data is the data I'm going to share with you right now is attributed or connected to that. But as of now, I would tell you that no, I don't believe the time frame in which our budget team is working in alongside you guys, governing board, that it's negatively impacting us. We've had across our different administrator ranks all the way to certified staff as a whole, related service providers and psychologists, our contract return rate is, in my opinion, very exceptional, ranging from 98% down to 90%, and the 90% retention rate of those returning their contracts. It really was only 4 employees impacted, so it was one of our smaller subgroups of related service providers, essentially. So I'm very, very excited about the contract retention, the rate of return, I should say, on our contracts. Now, that being said, that doesn't necessarily mean we'll keep all those employees, right? There are still opportunities for growth in whether it's in our district or in others, but certainly from a return rate, just to go back to your question, we are looking very good right now.
Thank you for that. I just want to iterate the concerns of my administrators, and this was not a lens that I was looking through, that our frontline site administrators have to hire on the premise that the board is going to make a decision in the near future. And so doing our due diligence and looking through this data and engaging with our administrators to get our questions asked as soon as possible. I will support a sooner time frame as soon as possible to consider. And with that, I will acknowledge and thank everybody for their time and effort.
Thank you, Ms. Ceja Martinez, for that. And I concur. For me, we absolutely need to give our site administrators, all the tools in their toolbox to be able to recruit high caliber associates into our organization without question. It does feel, and I know this is a non-voting item, but it does feel as though there is somewhat of a consensus, at least on the new teacher salary increase. Again, to Ms. Underhill's point, I think we're moving in the right direction. Yes, that may, impact or will, not may, but impact some level of compression. However, I know that we are mindful of that, and we'll be working on, I guess creating I don't want to use the word distance, but just working towards fixing the compression that we realize for many reasons, right? And that said, I do agree with the Miss Underhill. Look, all of our associates are critical to the success of our district, and that of all of our students, teachers, and staff. Every individual that all 4,000 plus, impact or inspire hope, into our students, and are part of the team that develops, once again, the character and builds on the character of our city, state, and nation. So, I agree. It's everybody has come together even through this time. With site administrators being on site and all of our staff associates, from the food service workers and transportation, again, even our non-classroom certified, and our teachers. I think Miss Martinez brought it up before, where, our teachers are working somewhat flex schedules, to accommodate the availability of whether it's technology of our students, adapting their schedules, right? So everybody's important. And, so I do appreciate the 5% across the board, without question. That said, I would absolutely, would love to put this to bed, if you will, and have something brought forth, on our next meeting is on May 14th. So we can close this out. But again, it does feel like there's some level of consensus, around the first year teachers and that minimum salary. Dr. Davidson, Ms. Myers, thank you both very much, for thinking very broadly about all that you do, and going over all the scenarios, from our state's budget and the impact of COVID, and Dr. D, from what really makes most sense to really inspire a culture of value, trust, and respect across the district, through everything that you and your team are doing from an HR perspective. So really appreciate all of your efforts. That said, I don't know if I do.
Sandoval?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. I tried to raise my hand on the screen. It didn't work. I just had one additional thing to say.
Sure. No, go ahead, please. I didn't see that. I apologize.
No, just after listening to the previous comments, from my perspective, if the site admin contracts have been signed, and with the current economic times as it is right now, I still would like to have this item looked at as far out as possible. So that's my perspective.
Okay. Is there, and I thank you for that. Is there further direction that we can give our district leadership on what we would like to see, in subsequent meetings?
President Sandoval, that's I appreciate that, because I was going to ask that too for Ms. Myers. What do you need from us to provide more insight, and then to couple with Mr. Sandoval's question?
This is Seha Martinez, members of the board. We have taken the governing board's input and comments to heart, going back to April 9th, and then tonight we brought forward options from the budget team. We do plan on May 14th to also provide an update, economic update for any new factors and considerations that we're aware of. It is certainly within the board's purview and to provide direction if you want 1 or 2 additional meetings, but our goal was to provide you with at least 2 meetings to consider recommendations. And of course, we have a unique experience this year with COVID-19, so certainly it's warranted to have more than 2, but at this point we've had 2 information meetings. We can certainly, with your direction, have it as an information and or action item on the 14th, looking to the board on what your direction would be.
Ms. Myers, David here, quick question for you. Again, I made it a blanketed statement earlier, and I may not, have this consensus across the board, but, with the knowing that our site administrators, if they may have some teachers, right, that are looking at Peoria, Dysart, and Deer Valley, and without our site administrators having, the tool of salary in their pocket to be able to offer a new teacher, the 40,000 plus, I think is putting them in an adverse situation to be able to bring those individuals on. So here's my question: is what if, I don't want to call this a compromise, but what can we? I mean, I would definitely like to, move forward on our new teacher salaries. Is there a way to separate that line item in our next board meeting to be action, and where everything else, we can have as information / action, with the knowledge that we'll have a final vote in that second meeting in May. Is that a possibility?
President Sandoval, we certainly can bring forward information where it could be approved in total or approved as a segmented action item. And again, we could certainly agendize the item as being information and or action.
Okay.
President
Sandoval?
Yes, sir.
So Jason Reynolds. So yeah, Michelle was exactly right. It will be very, we can bring it forward as an information action, and then the board can motion in a way that would meet exactly what you're talking about. So it really does come down to the actual motion that is made, and then you can certainly segment that out based in that process.
At that point, yeah, thanks. Thank you. Yeah.
President Sandoval, thank you. I do want to remind that this district has a liquidated damages policy, which concerning when our staff, classified or certified and administrators have signed a contract, and if the board hasn't made a decision and it can't meet their needs and they have to go find a job elsewhere, we're going to penalize them because the board can't make a decision. So I just want to put that out there, that we have a policy that punishes our staff.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, Mr. Sandoval?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I just, for me, I think next board meeting, if it is listed as an action or informational discussion, I think that is a broad enough way of putting it. So depending on what the economic updates are from Ms. Myers, that we should be able to proceed. So I have no problem with having it as both an action or information next time.
Perfect. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. And I would agree with Ms. Pingarelli on that.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions, comments for Ms. Myers? Ms. Myers, thank you again. You've had a busy evening.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if I muted myself or not. Okay, so moving along, we are moving on to our informational reports. 9.1, Budget Facilities Planning and Construction Reports. These items are also on our website for public viewing. 9.2, District Budget Report for the month of February 2020. Also on our website. District enrollment reports for the months of January, February, and March 2020. Also public information on our websites. 9.4, report on upcoming meetings and events. Ms. Airy, anything out of the document that it's not on there that we should know about?
President Sandoval, I think the document is current. I'll just draw your attention to the first item listed there. You received additional information regarding this upcoming event in partnership with the Peoria Education Foundation. That was sent to you from Mrs. Contra. So certainly if you are interested in attending, please let me know and I will be sure you have the link accessible from your calendar to join that meeting.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Okay, 9.5, legislative, state, and local updates. Ms. Michelle Myers.
Well, thank you and good evening again, President Sandoval, members of the governing board, Mrs. Pallas Thompson. You'll recall I've shared several updates regarding the base support level budget, also known as the skinny budget. And when I provided that update previously, I also shared that the legislature had adjourned until Monday, April 13th. And so now we're past that date, and there was a lot of conversation this week that the leaders of the Arizona legislature would be returning to the Capitol on May 1st and officially ending the annual legislative session sine die. And as I had mentioned, it had been previously expected to resume, and I misspoke, I said April, I should say May 13th. But what's interesting, as I was preparing this update last night, there was then an update that came out that is not necessarily true, that it will not be where the legislature will be formally adjourning, but rather the fact that if they do adjourn sine die, all of the pending legislation, the outstanding bills would also technically cease to exist. They would no longer be in play. And so we're standing by to see what will happen. That's the crux of my update tonight. We thought things were going to wrap up, and the reporting today is that is not the case. And so we will keep you posted as we learn more. If there will be any additional consideration of outstanding bills, and if there will be a short session, or indeed if the session rather will officially end. And that concludes my report this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Myers. Moving along to 10.1, board member opportunity to readdress agenda items. Ms. Underhill?
I don't have anything. Thank you.
Ms. Pingarelli?
No, I'm good.
Ms. Teja Martinez?
President Sandoval, actually, yes, one, and it was board recognition. And I wrote it down and I found it on my sheet.
Okay, perfect.
I promise it's quick. So I know we've never done this before, so I want to readdress board recognitions.
Yeah, so Kim, with that said, I mean, can we go back to that line item?
Yes, sir. She can readdress that right within this agenda item, saying what she would like about the recognitions.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So it is Financial Literacy Month, and I do want to give recognition to Ms. Myers and Ms. Airy for doing a CFO in the know. Not only does it talk about school finance, but particularly all the nooks and crannies of PUSD's finance. So thank you so much. I know our community, it's a difficult topic to understand, and I appreciate you taking that extra time to do the CFO in the know.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Ms. Teja Martinez. And yes, thank you, Ms. Myers and Ms. Airy. All right, moving along, 10.2, draft agenda for May 14th, 2020 regular board meeting. We're working on completing this document, get it all buttoned up for everybody here in short order. Perfect. Thank you for that. All right, 10.3, request for agenda items for future planning board meetings. Ms. Underhill?
I'm sorry, I keep flipping to the things and then I can't get back. No, I don't have anything, and I want to tell Kim, thank you so much for reformatting this, and I think it looks great. It helps us identify how we're going to address all these items, and I think it'll be helpful for tracking. So thank you for your effort on that.
Thank you, Mrs. Underhill.
Thank you, Ms. Underhill. Ms. Pingarelli?
I would have to concur with Mrs. Underhill. The format looks fantastic, Kim. And I do not have anything to add. No new agendas. Perfect. Or no new items on the agenda.
Thank you for that. Ms. Sahar Martinez?
Thank you, President Sandoval. And yeah, so I am looking, this is great. I had one request was to do a study session on the facility utilization, but it looks like it is on there, discussion on convening a committee. Okay, so committee, but that's not a board study session, correct?
I believe, what do you mean it's not a board study session? Is it public?
I believe, sorry, President Sandoval, I believe that was a suggestion that came out of our Citizens Advisory Committee, because as I think was stated earlier in this meeting as well, that now that we have that facility use study, that we may need to form an additional or a new possibly committee to kind of figure out next steps related to that. So
got it. So let me do this then. So if that line item's already on there, I would like the board to discuss creation of a committee. Like, what does the board want and how are we going to select the participants?
I'll second that.
And then it seems to me, so that's to create a committee. And the other thing is for the actual board to have a conversation about the facility utilization. I don't see that on there. Is that on there? Am I missing it?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So then that's the other one, the other item I was thinking of. So I would like to have the board have a study session on the facilities utilization to identify priorities, a timeline, and if there are any legal, not ramifications, but legal outcomes that we have to follow as a result of our priorities.
Okay, so let me throw this out there. So the third line item on this is discussion on convening a committee to review facility use study in conjunction with Citizens Advisory. Is that what you were referring to earlier, Ms. A.R. Martinez?
So that was the first item. Yeah, so we need a committee, but the board needs to identify who the committees are. So it seems like we need an A and a B.
Yeah, I gotcha. Okay.
And then a separate a study session for the board to give guidance to this committee of what the priorities of the board are, the vision of the district, so that they can work on things too. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, it does. I'll second that as well. Hey, Kim, do you have any questions? Are you clear on those, or?
I believe so. When I go to the minutes for this meeting, I will clarify through the stream. And if I have any questions, I'll reach out to make sure I have it correct.
Okay, perfect. Very good. All right. Moving on to Ms. Saya Martinez. Anything else? Or are
Nope.
you good?
That was it.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to 11.1. I need a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that. So I have a motion by Ms. Underhill and a second by myself. Kim, do you want a roll call?
My apologies. I was actually opening that up for you, but yes, please. Mrs. Pingarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Sandoval,
Aye.
and I believe that Mrs. Doan is not present at this time due to the technical difficulties, so I will mark it not present vote. Mrs. Seja Martinez,
Aye.
Mrs. Underhill.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 8:51.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.